Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to round 3 of the Former Alpha Championship for the second half of 2022. We're here at the Hungaroring for round 3, of course, having just been there in the world of Formula 1. We're in qualifying now with just over 15 minutes to go, and it should be a good one, that is for sure. These cars, obviously very high downforce, very capable machines, should be really put to the test for this very tight and twisty Hungaroring circuit, described often as Monaco but without the walls. Is this track. It should be very good to watch. Very narrow on some parts, so we'll have to see how overtaking goes for some cars. Should be a little bit easier than what we see in the likes of F1, because of course these cars are so much smaller, a little bit less downforce on them as well. It is currently Rob Whitney, the AM runner, who leads this qualifying session at the moment. A very competitive lap, actually, a 1:27.6. Actually, he is best at the moment, as I've said, and then James Atkins is closest in P2 with a 1:27.7. We're going to go on board, if we can, with Paul Millman, because Paul Millman's about to put in a very good lap indeed. He's just gone purple through Sector 2 in his previous attempts, and personal best Sector 1 and Sector 3, and he's still out there at the moment. So as soon as we can join him, we'll see what he can do, because we may find a battle going for pole in this session, and it might be between the AM runners, which would be very interesting indeed. Of course, if those AM runners do find themselves on the front row of the grid, they will be put back within their class, and then whoever is kind of P3, P4 or whatever on the road will find themselves sat on the actual pole position on the tarmac. But it will be quite an impressive sight to behold if that is the case, that is for sure. We're on board at the moment with Andrew Brammer, as he is currently P6 in his qualifying session, 1:28.8. A couple of cars occupying that same part of the, or same kind of area of the timing tower at the moment. John Baker, his nearest rival at the moment, and then Alan Matthews just a couple of tenths ahead. I'm going to go on board now with James Atkins, as he tries to bring the fight towards Rob Whitney, currently heading into Sector 2 by the looks of things. Well, more towards the end of Sector 2 actually, here, as we see him heading down towards the right-hander, big uphill right-hander, the back end getting away from him there, and there is a lap from Paul Millman to 1:27.9. It's not enough for him to find himself on pole, unfortunately for him, but let's see what he can do next time round, as we might go on board with him actually. Losing out through the final sector that time round, a couple of cars losing out through the final sector. We currently have 9 cars in the session. There's 10, including myself there. We have 9 cars in the session moment. We have about 4 laps attempted from every car in this session. So qualifying well and truly underway, and some good progress being made by some good drivers. As we're going to wait for Alan Matthews, actually, if we can, want to see if we can go on board with him, because he's looking very competitive indeed. And there he is, coming across the line there to go third fastest with a purple Sector 2 at 30 flat 0.2. I'll try that again. 30.2, there we go. That was far too overcomplicated there. That sees him go P3 as Rob Whitney still on pole position at the moment, but Andrew Brammer has just joined in on the action, and let's see what he can do. He's just gone purple through Sector 1 at 32 points. As I apologise for that, perhaps I should have taken a Pirites before we started. As he comes towards the end of Sector 2 now, does Andrew Brammer, and it's a personal best through Sector 2 at 30.9. Not the most electric we've seen. That goes to Paul Millman, who's in the low 30-second range now. That purple actually being taken away by James Atkins, so qualifying is hotting up at this midway stage all of a sudden. Let's see. There's a few cars I want to go on board. We'll stay on board with Andrew Brammer. He's going to be the first to cross the line out of the current suite of cars on the circuit. Running down the start-finish straight now, probably the only one of the kind of 2 major kind of wide open throttle sectors on this circuit here. As we see Andrew Brammer goes 4th fastest this time round. We're going to go on board now with James Atkins, as he's currently running P5, but has made good progress through Sector 1, good progress through Sector 2 as well, 29.9 through Sector 2, because Alan Matthews has put a 29.8, so the time's really tumbling down now. That track starting to light up more and more. There's a little bit of understeer potentially for James Atkins' cars. He heads round turn 11. Apologies, not turn 11, turn 13. Running wide there, maybe that's to give himself a better exit. Coming out of the final corner, that final right-hander, running down towards the start-finish line once again. And it is James Atkins who goes on pole. Phenomenal Sector 3 there, 24.3 finds him at 1:26.4. That is a very competitive lap time indeed. He is quite a ways clear of the rest of the field with that lap. He'll be very happy with that indeed, I am sure. Currently it is Paul Millman P2, Alan Matthews P3. We're going to go on board with him. Let's see what he can do. Let's see what he can do to respond to James Atkins' previous lap there, which was a very competitive lap indeed. A 32.5 through the first sector, so still a solid first sector, but not quite up there with the absolute best we've seen so far from this session. Of course, everyone in this session at the moment running these soft compound tyres we've seen the tyre of choice for every single race that the RSS Supreme has been used in so far. So an improvement through the first sector for Alan Matthews, improvement for the first sector for John Baker as well. In fact, slightly better for John Baker, both of them coming towards the end of Sector 2 in just a moment's time. Alan Matthews losing out by about a second, meanwhile John Baker making good progress as he goes 32nd flat, and that only has the couple of very twisty corners towards the end of Sector 3 to navigate. Of course, this race should be rather exciting viewing for race 1 and race 2 as well, the reverse grid race, because we saw just how good the race was in the world of F1, as we see John Baker going P4 then, a 127.6. He's just about nipping at the heels of Alan Matthews and is under threat from Rob Whitney as well, so a very competitive field this evening, that is for sure. But yes, as I mentioned, the F1 really was, I actually thoroughly enjoyed it, more than I thought I was going to, just to watch the likes of George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, the pace that they were demonstrating in that Mercedes car. And then, of course, Verstappen running all the way back from P10 to P1. Love him or hate him, it was a very impressive drive. But that's not what we're focused on at the moment. What we are focused on is this qualifying session for round 3. And Barry Clayton has just joined us. We can't go on board with him quite yet, but he's already looking fairly sharp. 32.2 through the first sector on only his second fast lap attempt. He's currently P2 in the running at 127.0. So he should be on for a fairly solid qualifying session. Should give something like James Atkins, Paul Millen, and Alan Matthews something to worry about. As we see John Baker heading through towards the end of Sector 2, we need to go on board with Barry Clayton, because he's just gone very fast through Sector 2, 29.6 that time around. But coming up into Sector 3 now, heading into Turn 12, it is John Baker running over, or was about to say he was about to run over the curb, but the car seems to bite in at the very last second and seems to be really quite comfortable, that car. Perhaps I spoke too soon, going a little bit wide through Turn 13. That may cost him as he dives into the pits, and Barry Clayton absolutely storms his way through the order and finds himself on provisional pole at the moment, just under 10 minutes to go in this qualifying session at 126.3, beating James Atkins' best effort by a tenth of a second. And there is, I imagine, possibly exasperation, or maybe just a little bit worn out, or a celebration even, for Barry Clayton spinning out there at Turn 2. Those tyres probably not got much more to give after a very impressive lap. Who can we go on board with then? I was about to say we might stay on board with Barry Clayton, but I think those rear tyres are probably done for this qualifying stint. A little bit warm, and he may want to pit and get another set of boots on. But we have Rob Whitney, actually. We'll go on board with him. He was at one point sat on provisional pole, currently finds himself in P6, and it's all gone wrong, unfortunately, for him there. I was about to join him as we came towards the end of Sector 1 to see what time he could have posted, but it is too little too late for that lap, unfortunately, and he'll have to dive into the pits and rethink his qualifying stint in order to get ready for the final push in his qualifying session. Of course, a very short lap here, so no major worries about making sure you get enough laps in for the end. Of course, we're not that many seconds slower than the Formula 1. I think we're only about 10 seconds slower than Formula 1 around this very tight and twisty circuit, so it should be no major problem for these cars to get some good laps in this qualifying session. Already we're about 9 laps in for some drivers, as we might go on board with John Baker once again. In fact, no, we'll go on board with Andrew Bram. Andrew Bram just started another qualifying stint on his first fast lap now. Speed trap there, very impressive speed, about 180 miles an hour for these cars. That is nothing to scoff at when you consider the likes of Formula 1 are only kind of hitting just above 200 really. Probably high 190s down that start-finish straight, so these cars very competitive on this circuit indeed. As you see, I've just noticed that, probably wrong of me to point that out, but I've just noticed, is this Rob Whitney in the sky? See if we can go on board with him. I don't think we can, unfortunately. No, we're going to go on board with an Alpha 75. Just look at it, isn't that impressive? But I think that's Andrew Bramber's name. Stick it over Rob Whitney's name. Is Rob Whitney a double agent? Is he found himself in the Blue Spark liveried car as well? That might explain why he's having to dive between the pits so frequently in this session. As we see, Alex Smith has joined us, and Paul Millman has joined us once again as he finds himself going purple through Sector 2. Sector 2 seems to be absolutely nailing, does Paul Millman. Watched over the past couple of seasons, the progression that Paul Millman has been really quite impressive. As he heads down the start-finish straight now, finds himself in P3 after a strong end to that lap. Unfortunately, Sector 1 did let him down. I say let him down at 32.8, so nothing to scoff at, that is for sure. But the end of that lap looked very impressive indeed. So into the 126s for Paul Millman now. 3 cars into the 126s actually. This qualifying session should be heating up. If all things go well towards the very end, we may see the likes of Matt Daly I'm not sure if Colin Keneath is taking part this season, but he did very graciously provide the setup for this evening's running as well. I believe it's Barry Clayton who's had a bit of an off there. Where is that? That is, I can't quite make out where it is. I think it was on the pit straight actually, but Barry Clayton found himself in a barrier, or maybe he had a bit of an issue leaving the pits there. But here we're on board once again with Paul Millman. He loses out through Sector 1 once again. It's better than the previous attempt, so we can find another 10th here. He may be getting ever closer to James Atkins, starting to put that pressure on, and which is exactly what he wants to do. Of course, he is an AM runner, and this puts him in very good stead indeed for the AM. For the AM pole, he's about 7/10 clear of Rob Whitney at the moment. Let's see what Rob Whitney can do. Rob Whitney's looking very strong indeed through Sector 1. This might be a setup or a driving style difference that we're seeing here, where we have the likes of Rob Whitney stronger potentially from the start of the lap, compared to Paul Millman seems to be stronger through the lower speed, more high downforce areas of the circuit. As Paul Millman comes down the start finish straight, once again it's going to be a little bit slower on that lap to 1:27.9, and I believe that'll be the end of his qualifying stint this time round. Still with 5 minutes to go, a few more laps on the cards for some drivers here. Alan Matthews actually putting 10 laps on the board now. Very impressive indeed. He's going to go on board with Andrew Brammer, because he's just gone purple Sector 1, a 32 flat, 009, and then a personal best through Sector 2 as well, a 30.5. So let's see as he comes across the line there. He finds himself going 4th fastest. That was a shame. That was a very fast lap coming together, but it seems to lose out towards the end of Sector 3, I believe. But still, a 1:27.2 season, 4th fastest. That leapfrogged him ahead of Paul Millman, but someone has just improved. That is Rob Whitney. Rob Whitney now into the 1:26s. The AM runners looking very strong indeed this evening, looking very competitive. It should make for some very good racing there, as the back end getting away from him there after an impressive lap. Potentially then the cars looking quite rear limited at this circuit, which will be a very interesting sight to behold, especially when we're in the midst of battling in just a few minutes' time. As we go on board with Alan Matthews then coming towards the end of his lap. Let's see what he can do. A personal best Sector 1, but losing out through Sector 2, unfortunately. See, with just under 5 minutes to go, our championship leader Matt Daly, I'm not sure if he's making it this evening or if he doesn't feel like qualifying, but he is currently leading the standings about 15 points clear of George McBratsby, also absent this evening. Alan Matthews then, our highest scoring or highest present in terms of the league. He is currently P3 in the standings, about 3 points clear of Andrew Brammer, so should be plenty of battling going on. And they're only 2 points clear of James Atkins as well, so should be plenty of battling going on throughout the field. And then Paul Millman leads the AM running with 15 points ahead of Rob Whitney, and then he's ahead of Guy Swarbrick, about 5 points clear of Guy Swarbrick, who is also not present this evening. So we have plenty of competition ready to take place this evening between some of these drivers. See Andrew Brammer seems to be some sectors seem to be absolutely coming alive for them, and other ones it just seems to unfortunately lose out in terms of pace or maybe confidence in the car for whatever reason. Towards the end of this qualifying session, not quite come alive as I was expecting. Likewise for Alan Matthews, actually a 1:27.3, not quite where we the kind of the heights that we've seen him at beforehand, but maybe it's just different circuits suiting different drivers' driving styles here, and not to take away from the impressive performance of the likes of Barry Clayton, Paul Millman, and Rob Whitney, as James Atkins finds himself back in P2 here, or I don't believe he left P2 at any point, but Alan Matthews now finds himself in P3. There we go, Alan Matthews responding to my calls. I wasn't actually particularly focused on that lap because it didn't look particularly electric, but much like George Russell in last weekend's Formula 1 race, it was just 3 very solid sectors, none of them purple, but in fact one of them not even a personal best, but it just looked like he put that lap together very well indeed and finds himself now P3 on the board. Andrew Brammer doing the same as well, again losing out through Sector 1, maybe that's saving the race a little bit, and that sees him now 4th fastest, only 600th of a second clear of or behind Alan Matthews, so it's certainly getting quite competitive throughout this field. Now of course we have 4 cars or 5 cars split by only 0.6 of a second. John Baker then obviously at one point leading this championship or leading the previous championship,
I believe I can't remember on what points tally, unfortunately, but currently 13 laps in, struggling in this qualifying session by looks of things. A 127.4, his best efforts so far. Alex Smith, we haven't seen too much from. He's only posted, well, I say too much, he's posted 9 laps. We're not able to join him, unfortunately, but he's looking very good in this lap at the moment. I can tell you, 128 is current best. He's got 32.4 personal best, a 30-point flat personal best through sector 2, and we'll see as he comes across the line now that sees him go P6, a 127 flat, so he's 4/10 clear of John Baker, but not where he'd want to be in terms of the rest of the pack. Barry Clayton still currently leading this session, currently sat on provisional pole. Meanwhile, Paul Millman sat on pole for the AM runners. As Rob Whitney and Paul Brady, I believe, calling it quits for this qualifying session after 9 and 8 attempts respectively. In fact, I say Paul Millman's on provisional pole. By the looks of things, Rob Whitney will be winning out here because it's a 126.8 for Rob Whitney and a 126.9 for Paul Millman. So we might stay on board with him now as we have just over 30 seconds to go on the timer. We may stay on board with Paul to see if he can steal back that AM pole, heading down towards the what would be in Formula 1 the second DRS zone. Up towards turn 2 now. The left-hander, the downhill left-hander, which this corner in particular, turn 3 coming up, can upset the back end of the car quite some way. And of course, if it does, it spits you out onto a curb, and that can really unsettle the car. But no such problems here. And he loses out through the first sector by about 6/10 of a second. Paul doesn't seem to be particularly fond of the first sector here at the Hungaroring. Let's see what we can do in the final part of the lap now. As everyone else, I was about to say everyone else in the pit, not everyone else in the pit. We have Alan Matthews and Paul Millman, the only cars left out on track. Alan Matthews is going to abandon this attempt, I believe, and he has done so. So Paul Millman, our only car on track at the moment. We'll see what he can do as he comes towards the end of Sector 2 now. The run through basically the S's here before you have the final climb up towards the start-finish straight. The run down here to turn 12, losing out through Sector 2 as well. It doesn't look like it's going to be the lap that makes a difference for the AM pole here. So we have Barry Clayton sat on pole for the pro runners, and by all accounts it's going to be Rob Whitney who sits on pole for the AM race as well. As we have just the run down the final through the final corner and across the line, it is a 127.7 for Paul Millman. What a shame that really came together on the final sector there. 24.2, a very competitive final sector indeed. That is by far and away the best that we've seen from some of the runners this evening. But what a shame that lap only come together towards the end. Maybe the difference that one more lap could have made. Oh well, too little too late for some, unfortunately, but we get ready for race 1 coming up in just a few minutes time, so don't go anywhere. And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the grid here at the Hungaroring. We have just under 30 seconds until lights out, and by the looks of things, no appearance from Barry Clayton. So we need to hopefully join the session as quickly as possible. The one he's going to lose out on all that impressive work that he did in qualifying. But it is James Atkins who sort of sits on provisional pole, the dirty side of the circuit, the right-hand side. And then Alan Matthews, Andrew Brammer, Alex Smith, John Baker, Rob Whitney, Paul Millman, and Paul Brady. So then it looks like Barry Clayton's unfortunately missing out. It's 6 red lights on the gantry. And we are away, as we see a little bit of overstate from James Atkins' car there. And meanwhile, Andrew Brammer gets a cracking getaway. That puts him into P2 already as he's slowly hunting down James Atkins. He's going to go a long way around, potentially late on the brakes. He thought about it, but meanwhile, John Baker makes a fantastic move, diving very late on the brakes, goes up the inside and gets the overtake done on Alan Matthews and Alex Smith. Up into P3 then for John Baker. Meanwhile, Andrew Brammer and James Atkins are battling out. As we see Andrew Brammer taking a much more conservative, much more sensible line through the left-hander, and that has unfortunately cost James Atkins big time, as now he's under pressure from the likes of John Baker, Alan Matthews, and potentially Alex Smith as well. But Alan Matthews and Alex Smith are more embroiled in their own battle. However, Alex Smith runs wide, gets the overtake done. I'm sure he's going to hand that back, because the stewards wouldn't look on that too kindly, as we see James Atkins down into P3 already. What a race start to forget for him. Still on the podium for the running, so he can't complain too much, as Andrew Brammer has made a spectacular getaway, has already jumped up 2 positions and is about second clear of John Baker already, so he's gone on a stellar drive to start off this evening's racing. As we see, meanwhile, in the AM running, it is Rob Whitney who leads fairly comfortably as well. Paul Brady, meanwhile, battling out with Paul Millman. As we see Paul Millman going up the inside. Fantastic move. Paul Millman seems to be a bit of a Sector 3 specialist, and that is paying dividends for him as we head round the left-hander of turn 13. So easy to wash out and go and pretty much end up in the pit entry there, but no such issues for Paul Millman or Paul Brady, as we see Paul Millman slowly hunting down. Who is that? That's Andrew Brammer. I didn't quite catch what happened there. Oh dear, in all of the excitement of the AM running, I somehow missed what happened to our previous race leader, but for whatever reason he finds himself now down in P7 on the road. Barry Clayton luckily able to join the session. He'd be a lap down, but should still get some good running in for the reverse grid race. Paul Millman then finds himself up in P5. Andrew Brammer trying to fight back. Meanwhile, Rob Whitney wants to try and fight for the lead of the AM running. So this is going to be a very, very interesting dynamic to watch, as we see these two separate but also kind of intertwined battles carrying on here, as it is now John Baker who leads this race. Alan Matthews, meanwhile, has got an overtake done on Alex Smith, but Alex Smith is certainly fighting back as we head down towards the end of, or head through Sector 2, now coming up towards Turn 9 and the Turn 10, the left-hander, very, very shallow left-hander, must be said, but a left-hander nonetheless. As Alex Smith very much putting that pressure on. Indeed, of course, this is a very narrow, very tricky circuit to overtake on, so he's really going to have to play his cards right, pick the perfect moment to do so, and unfortunately that hasn't come about on this lap, as he settles for P4 at the moment. Paul Millman, meanwhile, has got a decent lead on Rob Whitney, courtesy of Andrew Brammer. Andrew Brammer will be hoping to try and fight his way back through and back past, potentially have a look at a podium maybe, given the pace that we've demonstrated from the qualifying sessions so far. Paul Brady then P8 on the road at the moment. Barry Clayton joins and is a lap down, but what a shame, because we saw what could have been, with a full fuel load, a 1:27.9 on his first racing lap out. That is a fantastic lap, and unfortunately it came just about 2 minutes too late, really. As we see, John Baker still leads this race, set in his own purple sectors, as is Alan Matthews, going purple through Sector 2, Sector 3. Very impressive Sector 3 time action there, as Alan Matthews is battling it out with Alex Smith. They both find themselves in P2 and P3, courtesy of James Atkins having a bit of an issue, now down into P4, so not the race start to remember for him, really, as he now will be fighting to, I imagine is thinking more of the long game, thinking maybe he can bag a podium towards the later stages of this race. Of course, all it takes is one small error at this very tight and very technical circuit for someone to be off, and all of a sudden a free position to present itself in front of you. Speaking of free positions, Alan Matthews may be feeling like he is owed one now, because he's certainly got the pace to fight for it against John Baker now as we head into Sector 3. The run down towards the right-hander here. He's going to go up the inside now. He's going to think better of it, but is looking oh so racy indeed there, Alan Matthews, after what was been
after what was a pretty forgettable qualifying session. It must be said he didn't quite have the impressive pace that we've seen in some other sessions, but he has certainly brought it back in terms of race pace using that push to pass system. There you see the green air intake of the cars glowing for James Atkins, Alex Smith and Alan Matthews, and that is going to allow him to catch up to John Baker, the car up in front, especially with that slipstream. If he's late on the brakes here, up the inside into turn one, it's going to be near enough side by side. It wasn't quite yet, so it was still John Baker's corner, but John Baker, I think, was a little bit on the defensive, just playing his cards right, although maybe he was just trying to get the outside exit anyway, because having that outside exit of turn one gives you the inside for turn two, and that has worked very well for his defence. As you see him now running down towards turn four in just a second. The corner with quite a bit of altitude difference in it, as we said, can upset the car some ways. But John Baker still leads this race then, but being closely hunted down by Alan Matthews, Alex Smith and James Atkins as well. It's a four-way battle for the lead, ladies and gentlemen, as we head through turn 6 and turn 7 and run down through the S for the end of sector 2. There's still only half a second splitting the two front runners here as he rides over the curb to Alan Matthews. That will cost him a little bit, or will it though? He's definitely kept his foot in it and has very much been able to catch up, thinking once again about a move down the inside, but instead John Baker's going to defend the inside and he's going to switch around to the outside. Fantastic move from Alan Matthews. Yeah, it's not quite finished yet, but he's got the inside for turn 12 here, and once again fantastic defence from John Baker, as someone I thought was entering the pits there. No, it was just running a little bit wide through the exit of turn 13. Has Alan Matthews gone a little bit too deep into a corner potentially though, because Alex Smith is all of a sudden looking very much composed and ready for an overtake on Alan Matthews, as all four cars in the lead of the race and using that push to pass system. Alex Smith is going to go up the inside into turn one. Will he be able to make it stick? I think he will. That is a fantastic move from Alex Smith, although it looks to be that Alan Matthews got a slightly better exit out of turn one, so he may be fighting back here heading into turn two. No, he's a little bit too far back this time round. What a shame for Alan Matthews. Doesn't quite have an answer for Alex Smith, and John Baker at this point in time maybe setting his sights on keeping a defence against James Atkins, or maybe just bringing those tyres into a more comfortable window so he can fight back against Alex Smith. And that was a very good catch by James Atkins. Unfortunately, it wasn't a catch. The back end giving up there, as it nearly did for Alan Matthews. Actually, unfortunately for James, it gave up there, and he'll be dropping back through the order and fighting for some points positions once again. What a shame for him as they rejoin there, and there was contact as well between him and Paul Brady. But Paul Milman all of a sudden leading this AM race, finding himself in P4 on the road. Alan Matthews meanwhile is trying to fight against Alex Smith. Alex Smith posting purple sector 1, Alan Matthews posting purple sector 2. So they are trading purple sectors as they are trying to trade positions as well, heading through sector 3. The left-hander through turn 12 here, and then turn 13 coming up in just a second, as we will see a train of cars using that push to pass system once again, I am sure. We don't have DRS in this series, but we have a very competitive car, a very raceable set of cars, and that push to pass system helping out as well. As we see Alan Matthews already positioning himself potentially on the inside there, losing out a little bit of slipstream as he does so, and he's not quite composed enough for a move yet. In fact, goes quite wide on exit of turn 1. Might that cost him against the likes of Alex Smith here? I think it could do potentially. Still within a 5 or 6 tenths of a second. In fact, no, that gap has built up to about 9 tenths of a second now. But it's all gone wrong for Alex Smith through turn 3 there. That is not what he wanted. And now Alan Matthews has happily taken that position. He says, "Thank you very much, sir," for a very easy overtake, and now finds himself back on the second spot of the podium once again, as he is now trying to hunt down John Baker. About a second to do so, so his gap has doubled compared to the last time he tried to battle him. But let's see if, with a bit more of a charge against him, can he get that move done. We are only 10 minutes into this race, ladies and gentlemen. What an action-packed 10 minutes it has been so far. Meanwhile, further down the running, it is Andrew Brammer trying to get the overtake done on Paul Milburn. We've seen these three stay in pretty much the same order, and there's a very good reason for that. It's the fact that in terms of current pace, they are exactly as you'd expect. There's a 128 flat for Paul Milburn, a 128 flat for Andrew Brammer, and a 127.9 actually for Rob Whitney. But something has happened with Alex Smith's car there, or something has happened to Alex Smith as he's dropping back now. Now down into P4. I'm not sure if there's an error or a mistake or a close call or whatever, but for whatever reason he finds himself in P4 now, and Paul Milman leading that AM race now has a spot on the podium in terms of on the road. He's now P3 on the road, and that is fantastic for Paul Milman, really showing some cracking pace here as Alan Matthews sets a very competitive lap here. Side by side now, Alex Smith and Andrew Brammer. It is for a pro position, but it is Alex Smith, not a proposition, a pro position. And it will be very, very well defended by Alex Smith, or will it? No. And Andrew Brammer finds himself up into P4 now on the exit of turn 1. So that is exactly what Andrew Brammer wanted to do. Now he only has to negotiate the very fast Paul Millman for a spot on the podium. Of course, he already has a spot on the podium in the pro running, but he wants a better spot on the podium, one which is on the road as well. He'll be having to fight against the likes of Paul Millman. He has shown that he is a formidable force this weekend so far. Meanwhile, Alan Matthews hasn't quite been able to close up that gap to John Baker. John Baker currently looking quite competitive. He's just gone purple through sector 1. Alan Matthews having a very close call there, just about caught the back end of the car there. Very well held, Alan, because the car was looking quite snappy there, it must be said. But John Baker purple through sector 1, a 32.1, a 127.7, his previous best lap. Let's see what he can do on this lap, because it could be even faster. A 30.4 sector 2. Let's see what he can draw together through sector 3, being hunted down by Alan Matthews, spurring him on from the rear view mirror in that Alpha Shop liveried car. Of course, if you're like me, you have frequented Alpha Shop, so you say, and know it very well, so you know that is a very good sponsor to have on your car, as it is an improvement for John Baker. He goes 127.4 and finds himself with the fastest lap of the race so far. As that is Alex Smith entering the pits. Actually, what a shame for him, this race not working out the way that he would have wanted. This will mean, though, he has a bit of a fight against James Atkins. Alex Smith serving a penalty by the looks of things there, and now James Atkins finds himself in P6. Paul Brady as well could be on for a bit of a battle here, as Barry Clayton is slowly but surely closing up that gap. What a spectacular amount of pace he's had since he's rejoined the session, at 126.6 being his fastest lap of the race so far, and he's only just set a 126.7, so has no signs of slowing down. What a shame what could have been for him in this race, but of course that really does prove that the reverse grid race should be something exciting as we go on board once again with Alan Matthews, because that gap has closed up by some margin, must be said. Only 0.2 of a second separating these two now. John Baker looking a little bit uncomposed potentially, as we have the run down towards turn 11 now. Turn 12 rather, apologies. I've been naming the sector 3 corners all wrong. And it is Alan Matthews who gets a nose up around the outside, potentially maybe up the inside here at turn 13, but it was too little too late for him, and he settles for P2 once again. He's going to have the inside line for the final corner. He's getting the nose in the right place, but isn't alongside enough. Of course, if you're not alongside, the position isn't yours, or the corner isn't yours rather, and that's what makes a difference, as both guys using that push to pass system. Alan Matthews ever so slightly quicker on that previous lap, but it just goes to show you how much battling slows these cars down. A 129.2, 129.3 for these drivers as they are battling it out. A small error potentially from John Baker. They near enough make contact, but well defended by John. Heading into turn 2, it is still John who leads this race at the moment, but not for long, because Paul Millman is slowly but surely hunting them down. This will be a spectacular race from Paul Millman if he can close up to these two front runners here, as Alan Matthews finds himself still only about 0.2 of a second away from the back of John Baker's car, away from that gearbox, as John Baker now still heading these two, running into the chicane through sector 2. About half a second separating the two cars then. These are the closest cars on track at the moment. Boaston posting a low 120, I say low 120, Boaston posting mid 127s here. 127.4 for John Baker, 127.7 for Alan Matthews on that previous lap, as he has a look up the inside once again, but it isn't going to work from that far back. He's either going to try something very brave, potentially a little bit stupid, although that isn't the Alan Matthews way, or he's going to try something very, very well calculated, very, very brave, and it's going to stick potentially. We've seen it from Alan Matthews in the past. He certainly knows how to enjoy a battle. As we have the run onto the start finish straight once again, only half a second separating these two cars. Do any of them have push to pass left? I don't think they do, unfortunately, although they may be sparing it for the end of the straight. It may be making more of a difference there. No push to pass deployment on the start finish straight this time around. Where else are they going to use it? They could use it here on the exit of turn 1 or on the run out of turn 3. They will be the best places, in my view, to use that extra jump in power. Getting threateningly close there, but there's not quite enough that he can do on this narrow and very technical circuit in these very capable cars. As the back end getting away from Alan Matthews there, that'll cost him some time. I thought John Baker's car was upset as well, but too little for Alan Matthews, too little grip for Alan Matthews' car there.
course, I'm sure that Paul Milman would be liking to hunt, would quite like to hunt down Alan Matthews and John Baker, but he is, I'm sure, more focused on the fact that Andrew Rammer seems to be closing up. Of course, they should be battling each other at separate classes, but if they do enjoy an overtake or two, I don't think anyone's going to complain too much, as I'm sure Alan Matthews is trying to enjoy an overtake at the moment, but it isn't quite happening for him just yet. Will it happen up the inside here? He's alongside now. Who's going to get the better run out? I believe it will be John Baker from that point of the tarmac. Yes, it will. He can defend well into the final corner as well, and that pushes Alan Matthews out quite wide, actually. Did very well to catch the car once again, but is now a considerable way back as he runs onto the start-finish straight once again. John Baker using that push to pass this is now about a second clear of the car behind there, and that is a bit of a disaster for Alan Matthews. He's going to have to try and bring those tyres into a better zone once again and fight to try and get that move done for the overtake for the lead of this race. Then Paul Milman still in P3 at the moment, now being hunted down by Andrew Rammer. Andrew Rammer could be a bit of a dark horse in this race. We haven't seen too much from him so far, but he certainly has the pace to compete. He is matching Alan Matthews. In fact, no, he is one of the fastest cars on track. That accolade goes to Barry Clayton, 126.3. That is phenomenal. That's only going to come down as he progresses, I feel. But Andrew Rammer at 126.9. That is very fast indeed, about a second clear, or about half a second clear of the leader of the race. So he could be someone to watch out for in the later stages of this race. We have just under 10 minutes to go, and he is looking very competitive indeed. Alan Matthews closing up once again within half a second as he heads through the final sector. About 3/10 between these two, heading round the final corner once again. I'm sure he's going to think about using that push to pass system. Looking closer and closer, it must be said, but goes a little bit wide actually through the exit, and it's potentially just the tyres, or maybe his own kind of his head getting to him, getting away from him slightly, and he's just losing out when it really matters here in this battle. A very close battle, very, very hard fought battle indeed between these two cars. Speaking of hard fought battles as well, Andrew Rammer and Paul Milman. Andrew Rammer doing his best to close up to the Alma, and currently sat P3 on the road. Very impressive drive from Paul Milman so far, as I've already mentioned. I was about to say it allowed Andrew Rammer to catch up, but I think he had a bit of a snap of oversteer heading through turn 4, so wasn't going to be able to catch him that time round. As we see Alan Matthews and John Baker going through the chicane once again. John Baker riding over those curbs in a bid to try and make up as much time as possible. And it has to be very careful, of course, if you spit the car out, as it did for Alan Matthews there, riding over the curbs. The back end gets a little bit unsettled, and that will cost him a 10th or 2, which he will be regretting all the way through the final sector and all the way down that start-finish straight, because every single little inch of tarmac makes a difference. As Alex Smith gets the overtake done on James Atkins, which was a battle that we didn't quite see coming on here, as James Atkins gets a snap of oversteer and drops back a little bit further from Alex Smith, the car up in front once again. Alan Matthews then heading round the final corner, still behind John Baker. Both cars going quite wide on exit. This time Alan Matthews has used that push to pass system, has quite a bit of pace underneath him as well, and will down the start finish straight get that move done. But John Baker's going to fight back. I think he's going to go up the inside. It's too little too late for him potentially, but a wide exit from Alan Matthews there. Who's going to win out here? They're side by side pretty much. I think Alan Matthews is just about a nose length ahead and is going to have the inside 4 turn 2. Is that all that this battle delivers? I don't think so. I think John Baker's going to fight tooth and nail till the very end here. So let's stay on board with these two as they head up towards the second sector now. And that was a fantastic move from Alan Matthews, and a good attempt to try and fight back from John Baker as well, but he seems to be dropping back just that little bit now. The gap between those two much bigger than the gap between Paul Milman and Andrew Rammer. It's Andrew Rammer desperate to find a way past at this point. Heading into the chicane themselves, riding over the curbs goes Paul Milman. Andrew Rammer staying a little bit more cautious and staying a little bit clearer of them, but Paul Milman trying everything, I'm sure, because it will be very, very enjoyable indeed to watch Paul Milman get a P3 on the road. He's already got the AM race lead, which should be enough to take away from this weekend, but they'll just add that little bit extra to it, wouldn't it? As you see, they're oh so close. They're about as close as you've seen Alan Matthews and John Baker at certain points. But unfortunately for John, that has to come to a close at some point now. The gap standing at about 2 seconds. Has John overworked his tyres a little bit, trying his best to keep up potentially. And Bramo, I just want to point out, has a very, very competitive car in a straight line. 282 kilometers an hour. In fact, Barry Clayton, 283 kilometers an hour. So it seems to be the low downforce setup is actually the way to go so far, given the evidence we have in front of us. Paul Millman then under pressure from Andrew Bramo heading through turn 1. Meanwhile, Rob Whitney just very quietly, actually, putting in the personal best sectors, about 3 seconds clear of Paul Millman and Andrew Bramo. I don't think he has enough of a pace advantage underneath him. It's only about 2 or 3 tenths a lap at the moment. I don't think he has enough of a pace advantage to catch him on merit, but if there's some type of issue between these two cars, we've certainly seen it happen before. All of a sudden, Rob Whitney could find himself with a very handy lead of the AM race, so all to play for quite a few drivers here, it must be said. Heading into sector 2 through the chicane. Once again, John Baker ever so close now. I'm sure now in the sights of Paul Millman, actually, which could mean even if he loses out to Andrew Bramo, Paul Millman is looking quite secure for a podium on the road here, which would be one of the highlights of the season so far for me. Of course, we are only at round 3, but still would be very enjoyable to watch that, as the cars now standing at about a second clear of each other. Alan Matthews, meanwhile, has been rather freed up, it must be said, no longer embroiled in all this battling. A 126.9 on the previous lap. No, 127.5. Correct me, I am wrong there. His best being a 126.9. Heads onto the start-finish straight once again, and is looking ever so more clear of John Baker. John Baker using that push-to-pass system, slightly under threat now from Paul Millman, who's about 9 tenths of a lap quicker on that previous lap. But it seems to be that John Baker's car is just so much more competitive down the start-finish straight, which stands to reason. Actually, we mentioned just how competitive Paul Millman looked through Sector 3, but seemed to lose out through Sector 1, which is the highest, by far and away, the highest speed section of this circuit. And purple sectors. Rob Whitney posting a purple sector through Sector 3. Alan Matthews posting a personal best through Sector 1 that time round as well. So the track now very much rubbered in, and the car's now very light, and the driver's now very well experienced in race trim. It should mean we have quite a few almost qualifying specials going on in just a few minutes' time. Of course, we only have a few minutes to go in this race, and it is Alan Matthews who currently leads from John Baker, Paul Millman, Andrew Bramo, Rob Whitney, apologies, a bit of a lag there, Alex Smith, James Atkins, Paul Brady and Barry Clayton. This should work wonders for Alan Matthews' championship charge here, as it will for Paul Millman's as well. Already 15 points clear in the championship, and that will be extended further by a very successful race run for him so far, unless something goes awry in the final few minutes, which we have seen happen before. Something has gone awry though for his nearest rival, and that is Rob Whitney, a DNF. Unfortunately, I think something went wrong on the technical side for him. That is a shame, because he's been driving a crappy race otherwise, which is very much a shame to see. That is just the nature of sim racing sometimes though. That is a retirement from Rob Whitney. Maybe he can rejoin and still classify some way. If he can rejoin quick enough, he might actually still be ahead of Barry Clayton potentially based on where he comes out. But what a shame for Rob Whitney. Alan Matthews still leads then. I'm sure a couple of other drivers now be slightly scared of their internet connections, as we see John Baker in P2 about 4 tenths clear of Paul Millman. So Paul Millman really closing that gap up now, although it has increased ever so slightly as we go on board with him. It is always the way for commentators' curse in full effect. When it's commentators' curse, never in effect with these streams as we head through chicane through Sector 2 once again, actually one of the lower speed sections on this circuit. About half a second clear of Paul Millman is John Baker, and Paul Millman about half a second clear of Andrew Bramo as well. They've done a very good job of staying within this pack. Unfortunately, no major battles between Paul Millman and Andrew Bramo, but it was certainly being threatened on a number of occasions. Still half a second between John Baker and Paul Millman here. Who's going to get a better run out of the final corner? Both riding over the curbs. John Baker using that push-to-pass system, but it doesn't look like Paul Millman needs that much of it, to be honest. Although John Baker has the quicker car on a straight line, seems to be using that slipstream, and is only 2 tenths behind at this stage. Maybe a worse run for John Baker out of the final corner as they head down towards the second corner now. Anyone using that push-to-pass system? No. So Paul Millman, I'm not quite sure where he's saving it for. Maybe it is the run into turn 12. We'll have to stay on board and have a watch out for that, because it will be good information to know for race 2. Reverse grid race coming up in just a couple of minutes' time now. see Paul Milman positioning himself on the offensive very nicely indeed there, just making his car as wide as possible in the rear-view mirrors of John Baker, as someone's been kicked from the race, I think, for track limits violations. That is Alex Smith. What a shame as well. He was one of the ones to benefit from Rob Whitney's retirement. Potentially Rob Whitney actually retiring as a result of the track limits as well. I didn't quite catch that, unfortunately, but losing a couple of cars out of a 9-car field, that means all the cars fighting for some very important positions here. It could prove very valuable indeed later on in the championship running, as this gap there still at about half a second that has been for so long now. Let's see what Paul Milman can do through the final sector. Once again, we know Paul is a bit of a final sector specialist. Goes very late on the brakes there. Unfortunately for him, John Baker positioned absolutely perfectly to defend against it. Heading around the final corner once again, as Alan Matthews is now on the penultimate lap of the race. In fact, now on the final lap of this race. So we'll go on board with him in just a second, once we've watched these three navigate through the first corner or so. And there is our race leader, Alan Matthews, in the distance, as using that push-to-pass system. Paul Milman has a look up the inside. It's too far back, unfortunately, for him, though. Let's see, though, exit out of the first corner. Who wins out here? It seems to be they're all pretty even. In fact, John Baker, if anyone, seems to be the one who comes away best off of all, heading out of that first corner. Andrew Brammer looking very racy indeed now. That is something that Paul will have to worry about as he heads into Sector 2 now, which is, of course, where his car or his driver seems to be just a little bit stronger. So hopefully he can fight back, as he's not too far away from side by side. We're going to have to go on board at some point with Alan Matthews, and we might do that now as he's heading through the chicane at Turn 6 and Turn 7. And what an impressive drive it has been from Alan Matthews after qualifying to forget, really, or not the most electric qualifying. We've seen it happen on a couple of occasions for Alan. His race pace potentially a little bit stronger than his one lap pace, but he always executes a race very well. Always, his racecraft is arguably some of the best in the field, and this is a perfect demonstration of why that is the case. As he heads up towards Turn 13 now, just looking very calm, very collected, has done 17 laps of some very impressive driving, and has found himself leading the race for a couple of laps now after an impressive battle with John Baker, currently in P2, battling it out with Paul Milman and Andrew Brammer. But it is Alan Matthews who's going to come across the line to take the race 1 victory. Congratulations, Alan, on a very, very well ran race there, as John Baker should be coming home P2, and Paul Milman very much under pressure from Andrew Brammer. Potentially another lap there could have seen that battle continuing on or changing even, but it is Paul Milman who comes home P3 on the road, taking the AM race win as well, and it is Andrew Brammer who settles for a podium in the pro running there. James Atkins then will be coming home P5 after a disastrous start to the start of the race. He will find himself with still a decent haul of points to take away from this first race of the weekend, so can't be too disappointed with that. Paul Brady will be coming home. You can see James Atkins come home P5. Paul Brady will be coming home P6, P2 in the AM running, and Barry Clayton will be coming home P7 in the end after a disappointing or an issue at the start of the race. That should set him up well for the reverse grid race. So coming up in just a few moments time, do we have any victory celebrations? I think we have an end of race celebration from Paul Brady, but that spells the end of race 1. So don't go anywhere, because within a couple of minutes we'll be getting ready for race 2, the reverse grid race, coming up in just a second. So don't go anywhere. Thank you very much. As we get ready for race 2, the reverse grid race. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. The action here at Hungaroring hasn't disappointed so far, and it certainly won't with this race coming up. As you see, Alex Smith just sat on the grid, wiggling his wheels about, ready to... I'm sure is that a strategy? I don't know. Is he trying to get like a fraction of a degree in the front tyres there? Whatever reason he's doing it, maybe psyching himself up a little bit, making the car look a little bit more intimidating, a little bit more cool on stream. Rising a Lightning McQueen, that. But we have just over a minute to go, and it is Alan Matthews who sits on pole, Rob Whitney P2, Paul Brady P3, Paul Millman P4, Alex Smith P6, James Atkins P7, Andrew Emma P8, John Baker P9, and Barry Clayton P10. So he has been relegated to the back end of the grid, has he? No, he hasn't. He is on the front row, which is good to see. So let's see what he can do in this race after we were somewhat robbed of it, I think, in race 1. The drivers then, as they start psyching themselves up, getting ready for race 2, the launch here at race 2. We'll be hoping to see some phenomenal launches, which unfortunately we missed out on. I think a few cars had quite a bit of oversteer, quite a bit of wheel spin potentially. The likes of Andrew Rama, though, getting a very good getaway indeed. Yeah, it looks to be a fairly empty grid here at Hungaroring. It's not a massive circuit, but even so, it looks a little bit sparse here, as we have 9 cars on the grid at the moment, I believe. Does that make that? Yeah, 9 cars on the grid at the moment, but it should provide some very close, very tight racing action here, as we now have 6 red lights on the gantry, the revs rising as the drivers get ready for their launch. And we are away as there's huge plumes of smoke once again. Alex Smith getting a very getaway there. James Atkins getting a much better getaway this time around. And he's going to be side by side with Andrew Rama as they head into the first corner. But Alex Smith, very late on the race, is going to be able to defend from a good position. There's contact between Rob Whitney and who else was that? That was John Baker and Rob Whitney by the looks of things. That reminds me a little bit of Bottas just a couple of last year. But nowhere near as dangerous or nowhere near as... disastrous, really, as we see Andrew Rama going quite wide. James Atkins has found himself off the circuit for that reason. Not sure if that was indeed related to the Andrew Rama going off there, so a disastrous start to race 2 for them as well, much like it was for James Atkins in race 1. Meanwhile, Alex Smith leads this race. Barry Clayton in P2. He hasn't got the best getaway, or has got a decent getaway, but lost out through the first part of this lap by the looks of things, so he'll be ready for a fight against Alex Smith in this race. Of course, Alex Smith, redemption for him after getting kicked from race 1. He wants some points on the board, that is for sure. As we see Alan Matthews then, our race 1 victor, currently in P3, looking fairly clear of everyone else at the moment, about a second behind the cars up the road, and then about a second clear of John Baker and Rob Whitney just behind him there. As we see, meanwhile, Rob Whitney, Paul Millman are looking very close indeed, looking like they could be on for quite the battle for the AM race lead. Very good to see. Be good to see these two battling. They seem to be battling each other really well. They have some experience in it now, as Andrew Rama settling for P7 at the moment, and James Atkins has a lot of work to do to try and close up the gaps to those cars in the lead of the race, or in the lead pack at the moment, as we see all these cars heading down the start-finish straight once again. Alan Matthews using that push-to-pass system. The others not opting for it just yet. And a decent exit out of the first corner for Alex Smith and for Barry Clayton, in fact, as well. In fact, all 3 of the lead cars getting a good getaway there. Meanwhile, Rob Whitney seems to be more set on potentially keeping up with John Baker than a move on Paul Millman, although the inside field is very close. It's hard to say, especially this early on, where the battles are forming up. But Barry Clayton has closed up to Alex Smith, that is for sure. He was looking a little bit further away at one point, but is now within that very important half a second range, dipping out every now and again through some of the corners. But if there are small errors like what Alex Smith has just made there, riding over the grass, will start happening, then will allow Barry Clayton to catch up in no time, as he seems to be really quite set on the race lead in race 1. Bit of redemption, in race 2, bit of redemption for the scenes in race 1. Of course, all this battling, though, will be slowing them down so slightly, and it will be putting them within the jaws of Alan Matthews. Alan Matthews certainly knows how to navigate the circuit at this point, using that push-to-pass system as are the other 2 lead cars. They seem to be a bit of a field of their own at the moment, and there is Barry Clayton going up the inside, side by side now with Alex Smith. There's contact between the 2 heading through turn 1, but I believe that was Barry Clayton's corner there, and that push-to-pass system working well for him. He now leads this race. About half a second clear of Alex Smith. Alex Smith not too unsettled by that though. He's ready to fight back for it, I am sure. As there seems to have been contact further down the field between John Baker and Rob Whitney. Rob Whitney now finding himself up into P4 on the road. This is a phenomenal turnout from some of the AM runners this evening. As we see Barry Clayton currently in P1 has broken away a little bit, and by a little bit I mean by about 6 tenths of a second from Alex Smith. Meanwhile, Alan Matthews is very much certain, or very much keen to try and find a way into the lead of this race, that is for sure, as they're now, as I've mentioned on the previous lap, in a bit of a race of their own, these three front runners. Rob Whitney then is going to be trying to defend from John Baker, although we may be deploying the endurance karting tactic. It was something we use quite commonly in the British University Karting Championship 24-hour event. It was, why not use the other cars to your advantage, give a car that is hunting you down a bit of a hand signal to say kind of let's stop battling each other, let's maybe improve our own races by sacrificing someone else's. So what Rob Whitney and John Baker would possibly want to be doing for Rob Whitney's sake is ignoring the battle going on between the two at the moment. Eventually Rob Whitney's going to give that position back, and Paul Millman will lose out if these two don't get involved in a battle and just push each other further away from Paul Millman. As we see, Alex Smith has dropped down into third position now. Alan Matthews, meanwhile, in P2 heading into the second corner now, but Alex Smith looking very racy indeed, looking willing to fight back for it. On that previous lap, lost out big time. I'm not sure if it was just slow all around or there was a bit of an error, but Alan Matthews is matching Barry Clayton in terms of pace at the moment, beating Barry Clayton through the first sector, 32.2 that time round. Let's see what he can boast through the second sector, the gap at about a second. He's now cleared Alex Smith, which is not what Barry Clayton wanted to see, that is for sure. Or if you're a follower of Formula 2, that is not for sure. That is Alan Matthews. But I'm not quite sure who is and who isn't a Formula 2 driver anymore, given what is currently going on in the world of silly season. But about half a second separating these two cars. Barry Clayton leading them heading into the final sector, heading into turn 12 now, which is where is the sector 3 specialist? How is he doing at the moment? He's heading into sector 3 and is looking quite racy indeed, going up the inside there. I imagine that was more to try and defend from Andrew Brammer than it was to think about a move on John Baker, because John Baker was parked on the inside as well. And we have a bit of a repeat of race 1 here, a battle between Paul Millman and Andrew Brammer, threatening to continue on. Barry Clayton actually losing out that time round, at 126.9 compared to Alan Matthews is at 126.3. Two purple sectors, 29.6 for the second sector for Alan Matthews that time round. That is a phenomenal sector 2. I'm going to pick a different word so I can actually pronounce it properly. But John Baker about 3 tenths clear of Paul Millman, as Paul Millman seems to have broken away a little bit from Andrew Brammer and is under pressure from Paul Millman. I imagine you could probably recreate the Queen song. The amount of time that I've said Paul Millman, just Paul Millman? No. The amount of times I've said under pressure just in the past couple of weeks. Someone should do that, by the way. Someone should probably try and click together, see if you can make a song out of what I've said. But Alan Matthews then about about a second behind Barry Clayton. That battle, which looked like it was heating up, looking like it was getting ready, poised himself for an overtake, has all of a sudden waned by the looks of things, and Alex Smith is right back in the mix once again, which is exactly what Alex wants for his race. As we see Paul Millman then working hard to get past John Baker, and commentator's curse there. I do apologise, Paul, wrong time to join. As we see him now dropping down to P7, P8 in fact. That is a bit of a disaster for him in terms of the pro race running, because he now finds himself pretty much at the back end of the running, or I was about to say he was about to, but you just saw in the distance of the camera there, Paul Brady made a bit of a mistake by the looks of things and found himself down in P8, potentially P9 here, as Barry Clayton still leads, but Paul Millman, a disaster for him. He only loses out of position, but that just breaks him further away from Rob Whitney, the current AM race leader. 127s at the moment for Andrew Brammer as he's trying to hunt down John Baker, and the gaps looking to have opened up just a little bit compared to where they were at the start of this race and in race 1 as well. Speaking of race 1, it would be I think very useful given the kind of the events unfolding in race 2 to give you a bit of an update in terms of the championship standing. So Alan Matthews is now tied with Matt Daly on 68 points for the lead of the pro running. That season 13 points clear of Andrew Brammer, so this will be a perfect race for Alan Matthews if things stay the way that the way they do. The only thing he could do to improve that is to get the overtake done on Barry Clayton. Barry Clayton running P10 in standings, owing to not being able to be there for a couple of events. In fact, any event, I don't think. I think it's Barry Clayton's first running, or at least the first point scoring run that he's had in the Formula Alpha Series so far this season, which is good to see Barry back on form. But Paul Millman, meanwhile, it might not be the worst for him really, because he is 50 or 40 points clear of Rob Whitney currently in the AM standings. Paul Millman doing a very good job, I'm sure, by the pseudo summer break that we have. He could be potentially finding himself, well, it won't be summer at that point, it'll be autumn break. He will be finding himself potentially in the pro running once again. Rob Whitney then on 72 points, about 5 points clear of Guy Swarbrick now. Paul Brady now leapfrogged ahead of Steve Knight as well. So plenty of changes in the championship standings at this early stage in the season, which is good to see. It just makes all the positions that the drivers are fighting for just that little bit more important. Against Andrew Rammer at this stage now. The gap standing at about 7/10 of a second, potentially closing up though. If we compare their current pace, we can see that John Baker is on a 1:28.5 on the previous lap, but Andrew Rammer's 1:28.3. But there is a personal best sector through sector 1 for John this time round, so still on board with him and see what he can do through this lap as he responds to the charge from Andrew Rammer, the car behind. Half a second separating Andrew Rammer and John Baker at the moment as we come towards the end of that quick lap for John Baker there. Just giving you a second to focus on the lovely sights and sounds from his RSS Supreme cars. 1:28 flat for John Baker that time round, so losing out towards the end of the lap there, which means the gap is ever so slightly wider than it was between the two cars on the previous go around, but no major changes there. Likewise, the front of the running, no major changes either. Barry Clayton looking very, very competitive indeed. A 1:27.2. Currently, quickest car on the track at the moment is Alan Matthews, as he is doing his best to hunt down Barry Clayton. A 1:26.9 on that previous go around of his best lap, 1:26.3. That's matching his best lap from the end of race 1. Of course, we're not even at the halfway point in this race's running, so a very competitive time from Alan Matthews on display there. If he can keep putting those in, maybe he's preserving the tyres at this stage. If he can save the tyres a little bit, reduce that fuel load a little bit towards the end of the race, he could find himself in a very good stead to set up the overtake and put in a very competitive fastest lap as well. Of course, that's what that fastest lap will be from on that previous race. It will be that one, as I apologise for my phone making a noise there, that will be from that fastest lap that he took away from yesterday's running. Second separating these two cars now, in fact 0.8 of a second separating these two cars. The closer Alan Matthews gets, the more likely for a little bit, shall we say, that overtake becomes, because the slipstream starts to drag him in more, that slipstream becomes stronger, and also it may help him to have that car in front getting closer and closer to squaring him up. Of course, you have the downside of the dirty air becoming more and more prevalent from about 0.7 of a second onwards. As that gap reduces, the dirty air becomes worse, and something's gone wrong for Rob Whitney. I think there's contact between Rob Whitney, Andrew Rammer, and some shrubbery. A shrubbery? Yes, a shrubbery. But it is still both cars on the track, so no major ill effects from that. Of course, the battle has been slightly impeded there, which is a shame to see, as the gap between these two actually certainly hasn't been impeded, because the gap now at about half a second briefly there. So this is going to be one of those lead battles that kind of just threatens throughout the entire race, and it's one of the ones that I really quite enjoy actually, because you can't expect 20 minutes of out-and-out battling without some type of error, some type of mistake. And this is the next best thing to it, really, is watching someone perform an absolutely fantastic drive throughout a race, staying that calm and composed, to slowly whittle away at someone's time, and a leader's time at that, before they find themselves involved in a battle for the overtake. And that is certainly happening here. Alan Matthews, as he did in race 1, has executed a very impressive race indeed, as has Barry Clayton. In fact, got a good getaway at the start and found himself leading the race for quite some time now, and he is, I am sure, very much looking forward to a battle with Barry Clayton. We saw it quite a few times. I saw it at first. I think the first time I would say I truly recognised it was Donington, or maybe it wasn't Donington. No, it was Donington. Where was it? No, it was Thruxton. It was Thruxton or Donington. I can't quite remember which. No, Thruxton. It was Thruxton. I'm going back a long way here. I say a long way. It's been 2 years, but it felt very long indeed, hasn't it? But it was commentating alongside McRae, and it was the first battle I'd seen between these two in the Julietta TCRs, and they just didn't give each other more than an inch, but they didn't need to, because their battle was just phenomenal. These two know how to battle each other very well indeed. It's one of the highlights of the series for me, really. It's obviously alongside watching all the impressive racing, the impressive drives from certain drivers. But you always know you're going to get a good battle when Alan Matthews and Barry Clayton are occupying the same part of the circuit. We could be on for one here with just over 10 minutes to go in this race. They are still only half a second apart as he runs down the start-finish straight once again, posting a near enough identical lap time, only 0.004 of a second separating each other. See what I mean? They're both just executing a very, very impressive race here in race 2. A small amount of oversteer potentially for Barry Clayton's car heading through the first corner, but half a second separating these two still, so no major ill effect for Barry Clayton. That is a very impressive time there, as we see Alan Matthews just absolutely nailing Barry Clayton's time there. He is really executing this race quite well indeed, using that push-to-pass system up towards turn 4, which is something a little bit different, but good to see that he's found a place that can use it, and he's reaped the benefits of it, really. Heading through Sector 1, he goes purple sector, a 32.0, which is a qualifying time. That gap only a few thousandths of a second on current pace at the moment. In fact, gap shrinking down to 0 according to the timing system. So I think there's a bit of a predictive kind of algorithm going on here, which is estimating that these two are going to be enjoying a little bit of a battle. Not quite Amazon Web Services, don't worry, we're not implementing that, because you just sit here looking at pointless percentages that kind of take any gusto out of the race. But there's too much gusto, I think, for even Amazon Web Services to take away from this racing, as we have a second action between Andrew Brammer and Rob Whitney. So they had a bit of an incident earlier on. They seem to be closing up to each other once again, which is good to see, as less than a second remains between Barry Clayton and Alan Matthews, running down the start-finish straight now, heading into the first corner. And the gap is going to once again be about half a second. We have a traffic light actually for Alan Matthews on that previous lap. A purple Sector 1, a loss through Sector 2, and a personal best through Sector 3. A very weird traffic light. Maybe if you're colourblind, that's a traffic light, but a traffic light nonetheless. And a 126.3, no, 126.6 rather, on that previous lap. Also matching Barry Clayton's 126.6. So these three are really enjoying this race by the looks of things. Really embracing what was going on track, and there seems to be a little bit of understeer potentially for Alan Matthews' car at this stage in the race, running up towards the chicane now. That is something that he's going to have to watch out for if he wants to try and carry on this charge to the lead of this race. You don't want that much understeer creeping in, because understeer is one of those compounding issues, if you'll pardon the pun, which as he understeers more, he overheats more, which provides less grip, which causes you to understeer more, and you just start to shed time. So you want to try and avoid that if you can, but Alan Matthews knows that at this stage. As there seems to be a small error from Barry Clayton there, and that will spur Alan Matthews on, as they are near enough side by side. He's going to go late on the brakes, has to go round the outside though. It's going to be very, very hard work to make that stick if he can. Well defended by Barry Clayton though, heading round the final corner, and it is still Barry Clayton who leads, but at a much smaller advantage this time round, and that will be, I am sure, bringing a bit of a charge against Alan Matthews, but Barry Clayton uses that push-to-pass system down the start-finish straight to negate the slow Sector 3 that time round. A bit of an emergency deployment of that push-to-pass system, I am sure, but it is still Barry Clayton who leads Alan Matthews in second place, but just for a second he would have thought that move was on. Tell you what move was on, the move between Andrew Rammer and Rob Whitney, as Andrew Rammer now up into P5 on the road, Rob Whitney still leading that AM race in P6, Paul Millman in P2, enjoying a bit of a quiet race in race 2, and then James Atkins P8, Andrew Rammer, Paul Brady rather, P9. Someone who isn't enjoying a quiet race, Barry Clayton,
or Alan Matthews, as we stay on board with them once again. The number 13 car leading this race for quite some time now, and it has just been threatening, has this battle, as is a small bit of oversteer from Alan Matthews' car as he rides over the curb, but does a very good job to keep it on the road, and nearly doesn't keep it on the road that time round, heading through that corner, running up towards the end of Sector 2 now, only the straight before you enter Sector 3. And the gap looking very close indeed. We're starting to see the Alan Matthews kind of dive down the run towards turn 12. We saw it when he was getting very close to John Baker in the previous race. He would dive up the inside to see just how close he was, just to see if that move was on, just to intimidate the car in front potentially. But unfortunately for him, it wasn't on that time round. As I believe Paul Millman's had a bit of an issue. He's taken out his rear ring by the looks of things, and is now all of a sudden under pressure from James Atkins. So once again, James Atkins being able to capitalise on a couple of people's errors in this race, taking away some points as a result. But a bit of a race to forget for Paul Millman in comparison to what we had in race 1, of course. But Barry Clayton is still leading these two as they run down through turn 3. Once again, how far away are we for some lap traffic? I don't believe we're going to get any in this race, which is good to see. We have a nice competitive field. It is 5 minutes to go in this race, and Barry Clayton still leads at the moment. In fact, that gap is looking just that little bit bigger, actually, per their previous lap time. 126.7 Barry Clayton competitive indeed, and 127.2 for Alan Matthews on the previous lap. So that understeer potentially starting to hurt him just a little bit. There is a slight difference in setup between the two cars. Alan Matthews seems to have a little bit less aero on the car, Barry Clayton having a little bit more. So something to watch out for potentially, as we see trading positions between James Atkins and Paul Millman. Paul Millman going up the inside here, but a little bit earlier on the brakes, or was he though? He's able to defend quite well from that inside line and sees him back into P7 for Paul Millman, as it seems to be all lost there really. So a good defence from Paul Millman to take back that position, as I am sure he's looking to just enjoy some battling, as is James Atkins. They are in different classes, but no one particularly minds a bit of a battle between the two. Because this is the only real racing these two are going to be partaking in for the next couple of laps at least, as we go back on board with Barry Clayton and Alan Matthews, as Barry Clayton using that push to pass system down the start finish straight. Alan Matthews saving it for the end of Sector 1, but it seems to be working well for Barry Clayton. That gap now about a second and a half. So have we seen now, after such a long time on the offensive, after such a long time making that charge, that Alan Matthews, his car, maybe himself, just not quite able to deliver that level of performance for so long in the race, and we now see him dipping back just a little bit, maybe on a bit of a recharge, maybe saving the tyres for the very end, who knows. But Barry Clayton then a 32.1 through the first sector, looking very competitive indeed. That last lap a 126.6, so still comfortably in the mid 126s for Barry Clayton, whereas Alan Matthews finds himself in the high 126s on that previous lap, although much better than the 127s we were seeing just a few laps ago. I won't be too surprised if we see some understeer settling in for a couple of cars, which is interesting because in qualifying, if anything, it looked like it was the back end when the cars were at their ragged edge was starting to give up. But it would make sense that after such a beating for 20 minutes, the front tyres willing or ready to give up as well. 14 laps into this race, and it has been a very nice race to watch indeed, as we see Andrew Rama actually going personal best through Sector 1, a 32.1. The 32.1 seems to be the favourite personal best sector for quite a few drivers in this race. He heads down towards Sector 3 in just a moment. A personal best Sector 2 as well, a 30.3. This could be a very good lap building up here, so we'll stay on board with him as he heads round the left-hander, watching as that four-leaf clover on the front end of his car navigates the tight and twisty uphill left-hander, followed by that tight and twisty uphill right-hander. Running onto the start-finish straight once again, only the run down to the black and white line to make him come across the line with a 127.6. Very nice lap indeed. That around for Andrew Rama as the fuel load starts to get lighter for a couple of cars now. The pace turning up. Unfortunately, that isn't the case for Alan Matthews, who I imagine has pretty much come towards the end of his tyre life at this stage, as James Atkins and Paul Millman are battling it out. That overtake was done on the final corner, and it seems to be that is a fairly resolute overtake, as I think Paul Millman was a little bit slow through that final sector. but they still look eager to battle on, regardless, as we head through Sector 2. The gap standing at about half a second, building up to about 0.8 of a second actually now, but closing up once again as we exit Turn 2. So good to see the strengths and weaknesses of different cars and different drivers. We're just under 2 minutes to go in this race, and it seems to be it's all under control in Camp Clayton. But for how long will that be the case? Maybe a small error, you never know. A 126.5 though on that previous lap, very competitive indeed. Andrew Rammer is still whittling down the personal best sectors, still improving the lap by looks of things, so potentially too little too late for him, unfortunately, because there's about 3 seconds between him and John Baker, the car up in front, with just a few laps to go in this race. We should have at least 2, potentially even 3 based on what, no, I think we'll have 2.5 laps pretty much, although it could have been 3 if they were about 10 seconds slower, the lead cars. We would have had 3 more laps in this race. Unfortunately, it will just be the 2 full laps remaining. As we see James Atkins still setting those purple sectors now as he breaks free of Paul Millman and is now, I imagine, settling into what would be P7 on the road. And I am sure after the way the race started, he'll be happy to take home any points. Of course, all the cars in this race taking home some points in one way or another. As Barry Clayton, about 4 seconds clear of Alan Matthews, he seems to be fairly comfortable in the lead of the race now. Settles in P1 at the moment, about 3.5 seconds clear, heading into the final sector now. So as we come towards the end of the race, and it is Barry Clayton who leads with just 10 seconds left on the timer. This will be the penultimate lap of the race. Alan Matthews sat in P2 with him. Alex Smith P3 with spot on the podium. John Baker P4, Andrew Rammer P5, Rob Whitney P6, James Atkins P7, Paul Millman P8, and Paul Brady P9. I said I'd do this quite a lot, and I have. I do apologise to both Andrew Rammer and Paul Brady, but I'm sure I'll probably get used to it towards the end of the season, knowing my luck. But Barry Clayton then on the penultimate lap of this race has really led the way, figuratively and literally in this evening's running. Will be, I'm sure, very happy to take a race 2 victory after disappointment in race 1, not being able to join in time and just pretty much setting some practice laps, being a lap down. Alan Matthews then, after a race 1 victory, seems to be settling in for a P2 on the road, which is still a very impressive position indeed. Who's still setting, can I just add, 126s. His best being a 126 flat, 126.7, so the times have ever so slightly crept, but still very impressive indeed from Barry Clayton in this race. He's showed no true signs of slowing down as he starts his final lap now, and it has been a very, very enjoyable drive to watch as we see him heading into the first corner for the final time this evening. A small twitch of oversteer from the back end of the car there, but it was no kind of major issue for it really. Just put the foot down, the downforce grips up, helps you grip up, and you just carry on running down towards turn 2, a very steep downhill section, and then from here onwards you climb once again. In fact, no, I think you have a bit of a dip towards turn 5, but that's about it, and then it's all on the way up once again. In this race, Barry Clayton leads from about 4 seconds from Alan Matthews, when these two for about, I'd say, 10 laps are about half a second apart from each other, maybe about 6/10. It is now 4.5 seconds at some points on the circuit. Alex Smith had a relatively quiet race, but I'm sure an enjoyable one because he sat on the podium for so long. John Baker very much under pressure from Andrew Rammer. Once again for Andrew Rammer, too little too late, potentially what could have been if just a couple more laps were on the board. We'll have to find out towards the end of this race. You never know, a move could still happen as we see Barry Clayton heading into the third to last corner here. In fact, no, it's the penultimate corner. Correct me, I am wrong there. And heading through the final corner after bitter disappointment in race 1, after a dominant qualifying, it is race 2 victory. Barry Clayton. Congratulations, Barry, for a phenomenal drive in this second race. Alan Matthews weaving in celebration, and a well-deserved celebration of that, taking home P2 after a thoroughly enjoyable battle there. Alex Smith will be coming home P3 then. as we see him heading round the final corner. Fairly comfortable, no true battling to speak of towards the end of this race. John Baker is a little bit less comfortable as he heads through the final corner. Will be taking home P4 here, coming across line, Andrew around at P5 as well. Rob Whitney then, our AM race leader, and by quite some margin as well, will be navigating the final corner and coming home P6 on the road to take the AM race victory as he tries to continue on that championship fight against Paul Millman. That is exactly the way that he wants to do it. Unfortunately for him, losing out some points after, once again, much like Barry Clayton, bitter disappointment in race 1. James Atkins then will be coming home P7 on the road. And then we have a small wait to Paul Millman in PA. Is anyone having a spin? Well, someone is, but it didn't look too intentional, that one. Alan Matthews saving it for the end of the race, potentially. They're more intentional by the looks of things, as is the case for Alex Smith as well, as we see Paul Millman entering the final corner now. Let's see who else is enjoying a bit of an interesting finale to the race here as Paul Millman comes across the line in P8 on the road, P2 in the AM running. There's some car dodgems going on here as Paul Brady crosses the line. Rallycross RSS, that's actually what RSS stands for. It's Rally Special Speed Car. I don't know. Yeah, it's Rally, basically. That's what the R stands for in RSS. And RSS? RSS. As you can see, very well demonstrated by Alan Matthews there. Much like race 2 and race 1 were, which I feel is a good way to round out this evening's racing. I hope you've enjoyed watching it as much as I've enjoyed commentating on it. We'll catch you in a fortnight's time for round 4, which I believe will be Spa. Correct me if I'm wrong there. And in the meantime, the Touring Car Championship as well. And who knows where that will be, quite literally, but it will be in the Giulietta TCR. So thank you very much for tuning in this night, tonight. I hope to catch you in the next races coming up. Thank you very much.